Hey everyone, it's Kieran from the Run Testers here, and I'm going to talk to you today about a brand new tracker. It's a fitness tracker. It is the Fitbit Charge 4. Now, as such, fitness trackers aren't really sort of designed specifically for running. They're general activity trackers, and as such, the Fitbit Charge 4 really isn't aimed at hardcore runners, but it does have some really interesting running skills. It now comes with a built-in GPS. It's got an optical heart rate tracker built in as well. So it has running skills that are worth looking at. So we wanted to give you a review from a runner's perspective. We think this is going to sit nicely for people who are maybe just starting out running. You're kind of couched to 5Kers, you're people who run for general fitness. And we thought if you're in that market and you're interested in this, you would want to hear about how it stands up to those things when you're running. So here is our runner's review of the Fitbit Charge 4. So before we get into all the gritty detail, we want to talk to you about one big feature that is really like a main selling point for the Fitbit Charge 4. And that is that Fitbit has decided to move on from what is quite a blunt instrument to measure your activity in steps and look at something that things like the Apple Watch and actually Garmin have been doing for a while and reward intensity. So the idea really, and this is WHO, World Health Organization, and in the UK, the NHS recommended guidelines that you should do 150 minutes per week of more vigorous exercise in order to maintain good health. So movement is great, moving regularly every hour is great, getting in general activity from steps is pretty good, but actually for optimal health, what you want to be doing is actually adding in some minutes there where your heart rate is rising above a certain level. Now for Fitbit, what that means is they've created active zone minutes, and you get rewarded for the times when your movement and your exercise activity puts you into the different heart rate zones. So specifically fat burn, cardio and peak. Now you get 1 minute for when you're in the fat burn zone. They reward you double when you move into the cardio and peak. So you get 2 times. So you get a little bit of extra reward if you're going a little bit harder. And the idea there being that you can actually earn your activity in a short space of time by doing more sort of higher intensity activity. I'm not going to go into the science on that about whether or not that's a smart thing to do or not. That is just what it tracks. I think it's actually a far more motivational way to look at exercise and exercise effectiveness rather than just looking at steps. You know, you can earn over those points in a variety of different ways, different intensities. You can spend longer doing lower intensity stuff. And I think actually it's a definite sort of thumbs up in terms of a step on from Fitbit in terms of how often you're continuing to use this long term. When the step count, it just get a bit dull, you can start to look at, okay, how do I maximize my activity time? That's a good thing. So that's active zone minutes, one of the big features that are on this band that will make your runs a little bit more interesting. So one of the things I wanted to do quickly was rattle you through the stats that you'll get during a run in run mode on the wrist. And you basically get distance, you'll get pace, your average pace, you get heart rate, calories, steps, you get the time, which you get how many miles you've covered. You also get a count up and you get zone minutes. So you can scroll through all of those fairly easily, and it happens just with a tap you just tap it to pop through, and that's quite easy to get through. It's just a shame that you can't see it when you're outside. So post-run, you'll get your total duration, you'll get your distance, you'll get your average pace, you'll get your active zone minutes, you'll get your average heart rate, you'll get your max heart rate, calories, steps, elevation, and that's what you can see on the screen. Once that exercise is done though, you can't review it on the watch. So you can't see your history. You can only do that in the app. So you'll be able to see it immediately after the run, but then after that, you have to go into the app. One thing you've got to bear in mind here, you're paying $129.99 in the UK for the Fitbit Charge 4. So you can't expect all the bells and whistles design-wise that you'll get with higher-end running watches and other things. So with that said, what you've got here is quite a small unit. It's classic kind of fitness band territory here, nice and narrow. And it's not taking up a huge amount of real estate on your wrist. It's quite sort of minimal from that point of view. You've got quite a small screen, although you can fit a decent number of stats on the screen in one go. That's my home screen there, and you can see I've got quite a lot of information there when it lights up. The screen is a touch screen, so you do some of the controls with the touch screen, and it's really quite responsive. I found that to be quite good. You've also got one button on the side here, like a capacitive button on the side that you press, and it's kind of it triggers. So that's like the back button, and that's also, you can use it to fire up the screen. So some of the controls on the touch screen, some of the controls are done by that button, and again, that button is nicely responsive too. With those bands, you get two different sizes in the box, one long, one short. Essentially, this is the long one, and I had to use that for my wrist. The shorter one was too small. You can swap them in and out very easily. They come off, click back on. Really pleasing, that is actually. It's a nice little function. Feels nice and robust. The whole thing actually feels really quite strong and unbreakable, really. They're rigid, I think, to the point of, not so much comfort with the bands, but durable, I reckon, right up there. Now, one thing I do have a problem with is this screen, and if we get then into the kind of the running, so the design and how it works on the running side, you have a screen which in this light is nice and clear. It's clear enough, you can read it pretty easily. Okay, the stats are not huge, but there's enough there. You get enough data on the watch, and it's very legible. The minute you step outside into any kind of daylight, that stops. You can't see what's going on. Even in the shade, you cannot see the data on the screen. If you go into any kind of bright sunshine, you can't read it. It's impossible to read it on the run. Now, that is not only a problem for seeing things like your real-time pace, but also checking out your heart rate. But also, if you want to use those built-in Spotify controls that come with this, you can't really see. It's really hard to see to jump between screens, and that is a problem. It almost makes it unusable on the run or for outdoor activity. Now, for something that is right there with active zone minutes that we've talked about, it's a problem, because the idea with the Fitbit here is that you're going to try and do activities that are going to get your heart rate up a bit. And that will involve getting on a bike. That might involve going for a rigorous walk. That might involve going for a light run. It might involve doing some kind of outdoor park-based boot camp, whatever. The minute you step outside, you cannot see it. It is supposed to vibrate as well when you move between heart rate zones to help you know when you're moving into the fat burn zone or the peak cardio zones, when you're starting to earn those active zone minutes. But in our tests, that has never happened, even though I've got it set to happen on the watch. It hasn't happened, so I don't get any vibrations. I have had buzzes and vibrations when I've hit certain milestones like 10,000 steps, or you've earned a number of points, active zone minutes during an activity. But so the vibrations don't work, and the screen doesn't seem to be any good. And that really is a problem when you're working out outdoors. And that's going to be a bugbear for a lot of people. So whilst we're talking about the screen, there's one other thing that I wanted to show you, and this is a real bugbear, and I can't find, if you know out there, hit me in the comments, because I'm maybe being dumb, but I cannot find how to switch off this. Watch this. It's not going to do it now. There, hibernation mode. I think that's 3 seconds or something. Here we go, let's do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 seconds or so for hibernation mode. And it's just too short, actually, and you keep having to flick your wrist, it's got a raise to wake, and you keep having to flick your wrist, and it's just a bit annoying. I just wish you could switch it off or make it time out slower, basically. It's another little annoyance that I found. So I think one thing that Fitbit has got right here is the watch is really nice and easy to navigate. It's really simplistic. The scrolls and the swipes and the taps and the back button are all really easy to understand to go through the screens. So you have quite a good variety of stats on here. Everything from those active zone minutes that you've earned through to your resting heart rate. You also get your current heart rate right now. You get your total distance covered today. You get your calories burnt, floors climbed, and also your sleep tracking, your weight, and how much water you've consumed if you're adding that into the Fitbit app. So there's an awful lot of data points on there. You can't go very deep. So if you want to go deeper, you have to fire up the app. But you know what? For a fitness tracker, this really is just here to give you an indication, a top line, and it does it really well for that. You can reach those really easily and get a really nice overview very quickly of what you've done and your overall health. So that's really handy. You won't get, from a running perspective, you won't get things like your run splits, all of that data on the watch. So, you know, that's not necessarily great, but if you want to have that kind of information, you're probably going to need to trade up to something that's a little bit more run specific. From a fit perspective, another thing that I found whilst I was on the run with the Fitbit Charge, you're supposed to wear it. Fitbit actually recommend that you wear it quite high up the wrist in order to get good contact, get a more accurate heart rate reading by wearing it further up the wrist. And actually, even if you tighten it, it tends to slide down if you get into a really kind of sweaty workout where you've got sweaty arms, which I had, and it moved down, and it meant that the original tightness that I had was looser on the lower wrist. So that was a little bit of an issue, and that may well affect the heart rate tracking accuracy. So that's one thing to consider. It was a bit of a negative point on the Fit front. Overall, it's relatively comfortable to wear. I do like it kind of shapes to the wrist nicely, and it's got that feel. Okay, the band is a little bit rigid. It's not the sort of soft silicone that you might get with other watches, but this is a kind of device that I think you're more likely, it's nice and lightweight. I think you're going to be happy to wear this overnight in bed. I've worn it sleeping a couple of nights and you don't really notice it's there. So you're going to be more inclined to do that and make use of the other data that you get from sleep, which is obviously one of Fitbit's big pointers. So comfort, okay. I think it's a shame about the tightness, that it kind of moves around a little bit on workouts. That's possibly a problem. So some of the other skills that the Fitbit Charge 4 has, it does all of those things that most fitness trackers have done for a long time. So step counting, it will give you a little nudge if you've been sedentary for too long. So movement reminders, it will track sleep. There is Fitbit Pay on board, so you can pay contactless with this. There are smart notifications if you pair it up with your smartphone. You can control Spotify from the wrist here, but there is no downloading tracks and storing them locally. So you have to, whatever you're doing, your fitness activity, if you want music, you still have to be carrying your phone. But you get a lot of those all-round things that you've come to expect from a Fitbit tracker. In the app, obviously, you can look at things like your water intake. You can start to log your food. You can really dig into your general kind of health and well-being that comes with most Fitbits. So it's got a load of those skills as well, and if that's important to you, then this does a lot of those pretty well. So another running specific feature is auto run detection. Now, you basically have a time limit. If you start running with this, after a certain period of time, it's supposed to clock that you're running, and then it'll auto start the workout. You don't have to actually say, I'm starting a run, and off you go. That's all well and good, but that doesn't seem to work. You can customize it in the app. You can say after 10 minutes, after 15 minutes, or after 5 minutes. In our tests, the auto run detection didn't work, which was a bit of a shame because that's quite a nice feature. Your safest bet is to hit play and run. So let's talk about heart rate accuracy. I've done a number of different sessions on this, long runs, shorter runs. I've done some trampolining, I've done other bits and pieces. Walking. Now, the Fitbit Charge copes well at a walking pace with a Polar H10 chest strap paired to a Garmin Phoenix. It was actually almost spot on. It struggles a bit when you start to go up the intensity levels, and particularly higher intensity, it starts to track a lot higher, particularly in real time, than the Garmin does with the H10 chest strap. So basically what you're getting there is something that's, if you're judging it in real time, is quite difficult because it seems to always be sort of 10 beats per minute higher. It takes a lot longer to kind of settle down. So if you stop from a high intensity point, the H10 chest strap drops back lower to a resting heart rate much quicker. Now, talking about those active zone minutes, what that means is actually over time you're going to be earning more of those active zone minutes than you really deserve, because this isn't really dropping down to a lower heart rate as quickly as it should. In the post-run data, though, what you get is actually, it seems to be a far closer match to the H10 chest strap, and I think there's basically smoothing going on out there. They're probably doing some corrections afterwards in the upload and the sync of the data, and then you sort of start to see the numbers correlate a little bit more closely. But in the moment, this is not as reliable as a H10 chest strap, and that potentially is a problem if you're really hell-bent on working out the effectiveness of those active zone minutes. So let's talk GPS. We tested the Fitbit Charge 4 on all of those runs up against the Garmin Phoenix Pro. We also put a Stride foot pod on, and basically the Charge tracks about 1/4 of a mile extra in terms of distance against both. it's running slightly longer in our tests. And that also correlates over into the real-time pace, which is, there's strangeness happening there. I mean, sometimes I think this seems to be running a lot faster than the Phoenix Pro 6. When you look at it in real time, it just looks much quicker. Every time you sort of flick down and have a quick look, this one tends to be running sort of 10 or 15 seconds faster. Overall, that doesn't really correlate. When you come back and you see your overall mile splits, actually, sometimes they're very close together, sometimes they're very far apart. So I think the jury's still out. We've only had 4 days to test this. The jury's still out really on the GPS accuracy, really when it comes to sort of real-time pace or the splits. But anecdotally, it appears to run faster, and it's definitely tracking quarter of a mile on average more every single run that we do. And that's sort of over 5 mile, 10K, 10 mile distances. So when it comes to battery life, Fitbit says you'll get 7 days out of this from a single charge with 5 hours of GPS runtime. That's GPS and heart rate working. In our tests, actually, we have found that, you're not going to get quite 5 hours of runtime on that, on our activity time. It's going to come up, I think, at about 4.5 max. So let's talk about the money price. This is going to be $129.99 in the UK and $149.95 in the US. That's not cheap, actually, compared to some of the other fitness trackers that are out there from Garmin. You know, Garmin's are £99 down. So it's not that cheap. But to see if actually how it stacks up against some of the other watches, Mikey is going to take you through some of the other alternatives that you might want to consider if you're looking to spend around that kind of money.
Okay, so what are your alternatives to the Fitbit Charge 4? So there are a few fitness trackers with built-in GPS. I think it's fair to look at other fitness trackers with built-in GPS to compare first, and then I'll mention some other sport watches that kind of fit in that price bracket. We've got the Garmin Vivo Sport, which is around £100. That's got 8 hours GPS battery life. Obviously works with Garmin Connect platform, and also works with Strava. You've also got the Huawei Band 4 Pro, which you can pick up pretty cheaply. It's like £50-60. That's got around 7 hours GPS battery life, and doesn't work with Strava, which, a big deal for people. There's also the Samsung Gear Fit 2 Pro, which is no longer in kind of Samsung's immediate kind of collection of wearables, but you can go out and find it for around £80 to £100. That's got around 6 to 7 hours GPS battery life as well. You've got a much nicer screen on there compared to the Charge 4, and it's still a solid device, and I found it fine in terms of when I tested it. And if we're talking about sports watches, and I imagine most people who are looking at Charge 4 specifically don't want a sport watch, but if you want to see how it kind of compares, you can, for the similar kind of price range, you can pick up something like the Polar M200, which has about 6 or 7 hours battery life, GPS battery life, which I think it kind of works out an hour of tracking a day, basically, they say. And then there's also the Forerunner 35, which we picked out in our best GPS running watches. It's one of our favourites, really, for the price. It's around £110. Garmin, you can kind of pick it up for around £100 every now and then. It kind of picks up and pops up in sales. That's got 13 hours GPS battery life. Again, works with Garmin Connect, and does work with Strava. So there are other options out there. It's kind of good to see where the kind of Charge 4 sits within those existing devices, and see what your options are.
So, is the Fitbit Charge 4 any good for runners? Well, I think actually, for $129.99, there's an awful lot of data being captured here, built-in GPS, built-in heart rate, that are of reasonable accuracy. I wouldn't say they're bang on, and there are some gaps there really in terms of that. But for general fitness awareness, for general motivation, for tracking the main things that you need to track a run, it's up there. It's got that covered really nicely. I wish the screen was bright outside. That's a big flaw here though. You just can't see it. It will track it, but you can't see it in real time. And if they fix the screen, this would actually be a really, really handy little device, lightweight, comfortable to wear, reasonable all-rounder, with some good motivational skills in the app and some good depth in the partner app. And actually from building a good running habit into your everyday lifestyle for general health, it's actually a really useful device. And I'd kind of recommend it based on that. It's probably good value for money really. But the screen doesn't work. Some of the other little features don't work. There are problems with it. And I think that I don't know, for running happens outdoors mostly. If you can't see the screen, it's a problem for me. So fix the screen, please, Fitbit, and I think you've got yourself a really decent device on your hands. Without that, from a running perspective, I'd be tempted to look elsewhere, to be honest. I'd find a different option.